As somebody who has been going through some type of spiritual process for at least 5 years now, I don't even understand time, to be honest. Could have been 20, I don't know. But for someone who's probably been going through some spiritual stuff for the last, half of a decade or so, probably longer, 2017, maybe. That's at least 7 years. See, I can't even do math. This is why I failed college. But as somebody who has been going through these types of spiritual things, who would describe themselves, I suppose, as spiritual, there has been a lot of misconceptions and things that I've picked up on, maybe even I've been through myself, or that I've just witnessed and silently judged people for. And I'm going to share with you a few of them because I think that they give spirituality a bad name. But even more important than that, within spiritual circles, people often, including myself, make these kind of mistakes, or they believe these misconceptions because they think that by believing them, it makes one more spiritual. There's a lot of false information, essentially, right? So the first of these things would be the ego death. All right. So sometimes what I end up receiving is just ludicrous comments, really. You should see some of the comments that people leave on these YouTube channels. They're really quite ridiculous and asinine, and I don't even know how to respond to most of them. You could chalk it up to the spiritual community having a screw too loose somewhere. It could just be the individual. It doesn't matter. It's not everybody. A small percentage, 25% maybe. But usually, when I do get those kinds of people, the comments that they'll often leave will be ones of sort of a gatekeeping, right? Like sort of saying, well, I'm the only one who can tell you what to do and how things work. And one of these things that comes up is this concept of an ego death, right? So maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't. If you haven't, then I guess keep watching, unless you don't like me, in which case don't keep watching. But an ego death is essentially this idea that the ego, right, this identity, right, of who you are, the who you think you are, dies, right? It recedes into the back of your mind, and from that comes the inner source, right? That soul, for lack of a better word, that real energy of who you are comes forth, and you're never in your ego again, and everything flows wonderfully, and everything's amazing, and the streets are lined with candy cane gumdrops, and everything's delicious, and oh my God, it's also low fat. That's crazy. So everybody thinks that an ego death, which is apparently a marker for everybody who considers themselves spiritual, is some sort of badge of honor, and that, basically you get one, right? And there's this misconception around this because it's not true. An ego death essentially may or may not be this receding of your mind and giving way to the soul. I've certainly experienced that before. But if you want a true ego death, you're going to have to just go jump off of a building and then die, because that's the only way to truly remove your ego. This idea of people who have transcended themselves only to create another ego, a spiritual ego, is kind of laughable because it happens all the time. People will often, use this ego death as an excuse to put themselves on a pedestal, to make themselves seem more important than they really are. And they use it to gatekeep other people, right? And somewhere in there's obviously some truth, but the idea of an ego death is really the process of things happening over time as you go through different things. So, when I was first going through these types of spirituality, right, in my mid-20s, I had lots of these little ego deaths, big ones, some small ones, and every single time I came out of that this new individual, right? But then, of course, I was plunged back into society, right? So it's one thing to have an ego death, and then you got to go work at Pizza Hut, and you got to go deal with some fat prick who's telling you to make breadsticks and wear a hat. I mean, that's ridiculous. Have you guys seen the shape of my head? It's big. I have a big ass head, so I'm not wearing a hat. That's ridiculous, right? So this kind of stuff you still have to deal with, right? You still have to deal with being a human, being in society, dealing with things. If you're gonna go through things, right? If you're gonna make new choices and stuff, some ego death that you might have had a couple of years ago is not gonna last you the rest of your life, right? I had the ego death when I was 25 or something like that, and that was great. And then 2 years later I moved and started a whole new life. And do you think that my ego didn't just suddenly come back? No, of course not. It was still there, right? So this idea that you can just kill off your ego completely, From the spiritual Zen masters that I've seen, which are a very small percentage of the people, like Eckhart Tolle, things like that, they all seem to transcend things in their own way and then live a very different kind of lifestyle. But if you're actually trying to live in this society and do things, create a business, right? You think you can create a business just without, you think an ego isn't going to come in there at any point. So this idea that you can just completely remove your ego, your mind, your thoughts, and all of this stuff, it's a misconception, and it doesn't work, and it keeps people trapped in a sense of isolation, and they compare themselves a lot. So people start to feel like they're not doing spirituality correctly because of so many people have reiterated this idea that spirituality has a linear path and that one must go from step A to B to C to D. Which leads me into my next point: discovering truth. Spirituality is not so black and white, and yet so many people consider it, at least consider themselves to be masters of this, right? So you take myself, for example. I'm just a guy. I don't even have a professional camera. And one day I'd like to buy one, sure. But I'm not interested in telling people how to live their life. I don't really care what you do. I would like to take my experiences and the things that I've learned that have made me feel maybe less than, have made me feel pathetic, or on a positive note, share things that have worked, share things that have made me feel better about myself or what I've noticed in others, right? It's supposed to be a sharing experience. It's a real person being honest and vulnerable with some strangers and hoping that along the way, these strangers accumulate some level of help, or they can rely on some kind of wisdom that's coming out of this stupid face here, and that's fine, that's good. And then the people that I like also have that kind of attitude. Jeff Foster, never once watching his videos did I ever think he was talking down to me or that he was gatekeeping something. But a lot of people do. They gatekeep. They think that there's a specific set of rules that you have to follow, and that is spirituality, and they claim truth as their own, and they yell at other people who don't believe it. And it's so many different topics: soulmates, how does reincarnation work, twin flames, what is a twin flame, violet flames, tarot readings. There's so many different things within spirituality that there's a lot of people who are more than willing to tell you what should exist, what shouldn't exist, what does definitely exist, what doesn't. Even though there's no empirical proof, there's no way of really saying anything. Even the words that we use are just placeholders, really. I do believe in the concept of a soul, but I do think that the word soul is the best that we can do, but probably doesn't really capture what we're actually talking about. These are just labels and placeholders, really, for some truth that our mind can't comprehend. And I'm sure that there are plenty of truths that our mind can't comprehend. I can't even do basic math, right? So I can't even imagine, really, the amount of universal truth that exists out there. And for us to arrogantly claim that we know something, especially as we develop and move along in life and go through new challenges and things, go through these cycles in life, it's kind of ludicrous to assume that we know anything at any point, really. Other than Crocs are ugly and Burger King is shit, I don't know much. Thirdly, emotions. This one is probably the thing that bothers me the most, is this idea of spiritual people and spiritual awakening and going through some sense of spiritual journey, that one must remove their emotions, that we must destroy our emotions. We must become this very stoic kind of Marcus Aurelius kind of person, and that we should really get rid of any attempt to be emotional, and then we should all just like control ourselves, and we should be this this kind of straight and narrow person that we've come into our own and we know who we are. A lot of spirituality tends to, I would say, vilify feelings and emotions in favor of stoicism. And I think it's kind of dangerous because we have emotions. One of the benefits of being human is to have emotions. There's even a word in German, Kummerspeck. Don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it means essentially the feeling that one gets from eating too much, because you eat too much because you're sad, right? I'm sure someone must know what I'm talking about. You get sad, you eat a bunch of Reese's peanut butter cups, you pass out watching Modern Family. Is that just me? Okay, well, it doesn't matter. The point is that we have emotions. We're human. We have good emotions. We have bad emotions. We got everything in between. It makes life interesting, and it really determines the actions that we take. We take actions based on feelings, based on emotion. So it's strange that so many people are trying to get rid of emotions. The point of spirituality is not to negate or get rid of feelings. The point is to embrace them, right? And of course, embracing doesn't mean that you necessarily just do whatever you want, feel whatever you want, act however you want. But it means not running away from what you're actually going through and what you're feeling. And that these negative feelings, these uncomfortable feelings that so many of us do feel and repress, that we don't actually shy away from them, that we don't ignore them like we've been doing for years and years and years, that we actually try to talk to them and have a conversation with them in a sense. Actually listen to the feelings that are coming up. Right? Can we sit still for 15 minutes and actually feel sad? Or when we feel sad, are we going to say that it's unspiritual, or are we just going to a blanket statement sort of saying, well, I don't need to go through this right now, and we stuff them down, right? But the point of spirituality is not to stuff down emotions or to get rid of them. It's to embrace them. It's to feel fully who you are, to actually feel the existence that's happening, right? To actually feel and embody this living, breathing puppet meat suit sort of thing, and to go through life and experience life. And you're going to have emotions. You're going to have good emotions, bad emotions. Anything worth doing is going to be difficult. It's going to have cycles. It's going to be ups and downs. I mean, that's the whole point. You want to accomplish something. And if you want to accomplish something, then over time, things are going to break down so that you can accomplish those things. Relationships, friendships, careers, right? If you have this burning desire to do something, even if it's not fully fleshed out, and you need to get there. One of the benefits of a spiritual awakening or a spiritual journey is that you really want to understand yourself, so you take those actions to move forward, to get those types of things. And if you're going to take actions to get towards things that you really do desire, then you're going to go through moments where you don't know what the hell's happening, and you're going to feel uncertain, and you're going to feel sad, and you might have a few ego deaths along the way. And you have to discover, okay, well, maybe 2 years ago when I first started, I thought this, and now I don't think this anymore because I've been through new experiences. And sometimes they can go back around, sometimes they can change, sometimes you never think the same way again. This is spirituality. It's not a linear process where everything must be like this, right? It's a chaotic mess because who you are is imperfect, and it's a chaotic mess, right? So these are just some misconceptions. It's not everything, right? You could make really a 40-minute video on this, but these three ideas, this idea of trying to remove your emotions, right? Ego deaths, and this sort of black and white mentality of truth, right? These misconceptions about spirituality are best left as maybe thought processes while you're taking a bubble bath or something, but they're not really supposed to be implemented into an everyday life, because in my experience, by fully blindly believing these misconceptions, you're negating and denying yourself a real and full experience of being human, which is the entire point of being here.